Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
You know, we're under the gun, John. Remember what I said. Egbert says if we don't perform today, there's going to be a huge bloodbath. So we have to really pull it up a couple notches this morning. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, listen, we're not big metrics guys, but I'm sure he's seen the metrics. He knows how we're doing, Brad.
Right.
He sees what the numbers are.
And by the way, I have to tell you something. I haven't told you off air, but I'll tell you on air on Friday. For some reason, Friday on our website, the post that has every day when we get off the air, I go and chop up the audio. I put up a post on bjshow.co. I got it right for a change. bjshow.co. And you can go to that particular post for the day, and it gives you a little brief synopsis of the story, and then it gives you all three segments as far as our podcast concerned. And on Friday, we set an all-time record.
I believe it, Brad. We do a really good job of promoting it on, I put it on my website, on social media, and most importantly, folks share the show with their friends. They send it to each other. They say, can you believe what Brad said? Can you believe what John said? Isn't it great that they're giving some insight, etc.? Let's not pat ourselves on the back about how great we are, Brad. But of course we're getting more and more traffic, Brad. This is a different show, Brad. This is a much different show than people have heard before.
John is the star. John gives all the insight. I'm just along to
that is not
push buttons.
Fact, Brad, a friend who happens to be another radio host, and they are not from mid-Missouri. They're from another part of the state, complimented us yesterday, and out of respect to him, I will not mention his name. But I told him, Brad makes it so easy. You make it so easy, Brad. And there's so much that I learn from you every week.
Well, but see, once again, the true, and I'm not trying to say that, we've reached the pinnacle of talk radio success, but the true successful talk shows are easy to listen to because nobody's trying to beat you over the head, and in other words, it's not scripted. I mean, once
right.
again, the crazy thing about talk radio is that some guys, like for example, I don't want to beat up on certain people, but if you listen to 97.1 on the weekends, they run a lot of paid, advertorials, whatever you want to call it. And some of those are so hard to listen to. They're just, like, okay.
Painful.
Well,
painful.
And look, not making fun of you, but there's one guy who does a financial show, and the interesting thing is he does a financial show that is totally scripted. And the bizarre part of it is I don't do that much traveling, but I've been in other parts of the state, and I've heard the exact same script by other financial guys. In other words, he's buying a script, and he's just reading the script. He's not,
of course, yeah.
He's not being him. So we come on here, and we just do goofy stuff. And
real quick, I'll add too, Brad. And I shouldn't use the word cancer. It's a horrible affliction, let's say, upon corporations, because the big thing for the last decade has been for employee events, whether internal or external, to have a, quote, fireside chat. And at a big corporate town hall, you'll have an executive sit down with a member of the leadership team and ask each other questions. And it could be a 20-minute Q&A that's entirely scripted, Brad. Literally every word is scripted. And if I'm sitting there as an employee, first of all, if I didn't write the messages myself, I'm looking at it and saying, we could have read this in a Word document. We could have skimmed this in 4 minutes. But instead, we go through the performative theatrics of sitting down and saying, well, CEO X, you have the popularity of a runaway train. It's like a Simpsons bit. Why is our company so successful? The people are the engine of our company. Like, don't insult us with performative stuff. And I feel the same. It's exactly what you're talking about, Brad. You listen to a scripted show where you know that everybody has their line of what they're going to say. That's what you would call, Brad, a button pusher, right? You call that a button pusher in the industry. You're driving in the car. You're just like, get this off of here.
Well, the interesting thing about that is what John's not going to talk about is that recently the head dude at CEO at Bayer, who's a German guy, he had his fireside chat, and I've got a section of it here. You want me to play the intro?
I do want to hear
intro
it.
where he comes out and he sits down in front of all the people. He's being broadcast around the world, and he sits down and he looks at the camera and he says, "Achtung, ich bin einem Gummischuh." Everybody went, "Oh my God!" And he yelled.
That was, yeah. You know what? And you should see what that is and interpreted into English. It's even worse than it sounds, Brad.
Okay, something that I want to talk about, which I found sort of interesting, and I believe you probably know the backstory in this because you're so good at this stuff, like the court decision that came out yesterday with the Realtor, the National Association of Realtors, which essentially blew up the real estate system as we know it as far as commissions are concerned. Are you familiar with this?
So yesterday on the call that I listened to on Hedgeye, a guy was talking about Redfin, the company Redfin, and Hedgeye has been short Redfin for a long time, and I didn't pay attention to every detail, but it has to do with the fees, right?
Right.
Like the buyer fee, and so now it's going to be essentially it's a scam for everybody. It's been a scam for everybody to make money, isn't it? A lot of self-dealing that involves fees.
The downside has been, like, let's say you and your significant other decide you want to buy a new house. And you go on, any of the sites. Could be Realtor.com, or could be whatever the site you go on. There's a bazillion of them, and you find a really nice house. You go, wow, this looks exactly like what we want. And you call up your friend Susie, who's a buyer's agent. She's a realtor and she's a buyer's agent. And you say, Susie, can you arrange and open for us to walk through this house? Sure, John. Okay, she calls you back. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock, you go over and you go, oh my God, I'm in love with this house. We're going to write a contract. Okay, let's say John is going to have a cheaper home. It's a $2 million home, okay? Yeah. She's going to make, I don't know. Well, what's 3% of $2 million? 1% of $2 million would be $20,000. She's going to make $60,000 for showing you the home. Now, obviously, she's got some paperwork to do on your end, the whole bit. But see, once again, I say to a large degree, the whole real estate thing is sort of a scam because you got to deal with the appraisers,
Right.
And not only that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, they scare you into, oh, well, you can't navigate these waters by yourself. You have to have a seasoned real estate pro. Okay, you know what? All you really need is an attorney. That's all you really need.
Yeah, boy, attorneys would tell you that, wouldn't they?
Right, of course. Now, do you know this is interesting in the state of Missouri? Attorneys can sell real estate. They have the same level of real estate license as a broker. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, in the state of Missouri.
That's interesting.
Yeah, state of Missouri, an attorney, like let's say if you were an attorney and you decided I don't want to, just rent my office out anytime. I just don't want to work by hourly fee. I'm just going to go in the real estate business. You could essentially just declare yourself in the real estate business, and you could do anything that not necessarily an agent, but a broker can do. You can do the whole shooting match.
Yeah,
in the state of Missouri.
I believe it.
But see, the thing was about collusion, and to a certain extent, let's be honest. It's like I give the example of the two attorneys who are fighting it out at court in St. Louis County. They're fighting out in court, and they're yelling back and forth at each other, and they're vehemently proving that their client is right and the other client's wrong, and vice versa. And it's 5 o'clock, court adjourns, and at 5:15 they're in CJ Muggs across the street slapping each other on the backs. To a certain extent, I think that's what real estate agents do.
Yeah, I could imagine that. But Brad, you extend that also to any given industry. So the industry wants to write rules for itself because you want the biggest players in the industry to set the standards to prevent competition from smaller companies. And then the bigger companies can still profit because in order for the teeny tiny startups to ever get any way to get into the market, then they have to partner. They have to partner with the big companies, and then the big companies can structure the contract whereby they get a majority of the profits.
Okay. Well, so Now, did you hear that this case came out of Missouri? That's what I've heard.
Yeah, it came out of Kansas City. In fact, that's why the only reason why I started paying attention on this call that I was on yesterday is this guy Josh Steiner said this is actually a case out of Kansas City, Missouri, and then I started actually paying attention.
Interesting. Well, the thing there is that who knows what's going to happen. If I understand, I think one of the big issues is going to be that the buyer, if you are a buyer, you're going to essentially, as it is right now, as I understand, let's say you got a $100,000 house, and the commission on both sides is 6%. So in other words, you would essentially, the buyer would pay $94,000, or no, the buyer would pay the whole $100,000, and then the $6,000, the 6% would be divvied up between the buyer and the seller, between the buyer and the seller's real estate agents is what I meant to say. And as I understand it, the way this is going to work is that the buyer is going to have to pay the buyer's agent directly, that they will not essentially take 6% off the top. They will take the seller's fee off the top, and then you as the buyer will have to stroke a check through the closing.
Wow, I see. Okay.
Once again, to me, it's like, okay, isn't that sort of like smoke and mirrors? Isn't that like you end up, it's a different road, but you end up at the same place? You know what I'm saying? It's the point where it's like,
yeah, it's like, but I mean, and so, yeah, the example that Steiner used on the call yesterday was he was using a $1 million house as an example. And you just think of the fees of that, and you just think of how much, anytime you have that much cash in there, you're going to have people splitting hairs because a percent here and a percent there, and pretty soon you're talking real money.
Well, and once again, I know real estate is not an easy job. It can be when some of these agents get to the point where they get sort of like superstar status, where they have the whole staff and the whole bit. They're not really knocking on doors every day, or really beating the street and stuff like that. Their staff is. But once again, it's like anything. If you have the talent for it, more power to you. But I don't know. I've heard. One of the things I heard yesterday afternoon was a guy talking about the fact that this is going to be the shakeout in the real estate industry, because there's going to be a lot of agents who are going to say, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, and Brad, what's the stat? You've probably heard the stat before. Excuse me. Whereas X percentage of licensed real estate agents sell fewer than, 5 homes a year or something like that. So in other words, most people who have their license aren't actually, to your point, pounding the pavement and actually making deals. They're retired and they think, I'll sell a house here and there. I'll be a socialite. I'll get to see some pretty houses. I fancy myself an interior design expert, whatever.
Well, I think some of the people get into it because they think that they can, it's not like a 9 to 5. They don't have to show up at an office every day.
Right, which is the allure of it. Sure.
Right, but I don't know. Who knows? Okay. We talked about this. Matter of fact, there's a couple different stories I read early this morning. Matter of fact, one of them, I'm looking at Trump unable to make massive $464 million bond. What is other options? Interesting stuff like that. The stuff going on with the NCAA. Okay, are you a sports fan?
Now that I'm not sitting in an office, I don't even do a pool anymore, Brad. I don't even do an NCAA pool anymore. No, I've watched 0 minutes of college basketball this year.
Are you familiar with what they call the collectives? You know what a collective is?
No, I don't.
Okay. With the whole NIL, name, image, and likeness thing, essentially the players have become sort of free agents, where they can essentially, talk to people. Like an example probably would be the one I heard right away in the radio business was, if you're a Mizzou star on the football team, you could go to a car dealer and say, hey, I'll come and sign autographs at your car dealership on Saturday from noon till 2, and it's $10,000. And the car dealer would go, oh, wow, that's a super deal. Here's a check. See you at noon on Saturday. Okay. What the collectives does is, essentially, the collective is like, I would sort of liken them to the mafia, where what they do is they go and they say, hey, you want a good football team this year? Well, you got to put some money in the pot, buddy. We're the Mizzou Collective. And you as a business.
Interesting. So are they kind of like a booster club?
That's the exact kind of parallel I would give, is that they're a booster club, but they're a legal booster club, whereas through the years there have been accusations that the booster clubs are giving people like
for sure, like under the table and free shoes and whatever.
Right, they're giving the athletes the Italian handshake. You know what the Italian handshake is, don't you?
Well, I from context clues, I could deduce it. I could deduce what it is, Brad. But I get it.
The mafia handshake is $100 bill in your palm of your hand, and you shake. Hey, nice seeing you. And you palm $100 bill. Okay, so now they're talking about. And I heard, once again, this is sort of weird. You talk about not being a sports guy, okay? For some crazy reason, Friday night I was out and about. I'm hitting scan on my radio, and I'm hearing the ESPN 101 was running the with the Houston game or something like that, and I'm going like, okay.
Houston basketball?
Yeah, Houston. Okay. Yeah, they're the number one team in the country right now. This is
nice.
college, the number one team in the country, okay? And they're the number one, number two. And they were talking about the fact that how, and in between halves, they're talking about the fact that there's legislation that might be proposed in the U.S. Congress that's the only thing that's going to save college sports, because it's gotten to the point where they put this whole thing with the transfer portal, where it used to be very tough for a student. If once you go to a school, you're sort of stuck there for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, I'm going like, okay, here we go again. It's spinning out of control, and the government's going to come in and they're going to run college sports. And the thing for me is just like saying, okay, let's just pull across, pull the curtains back and just say, okay, let's just make college basketball, NBA, triple A, like you have in
I get it. I see exactly what a feeder system for the NBA.
And just say, first off, if you've ever known anybody that you've gone to college with who's a college athlete, there are exceptions to the rules, but most of the college athletes get the special, and they have for years and years and years and years and years, get the special treatment where, obviously, if the team is traveling, like right now, if the team is, Mizzou, the basketball team's out of it, but if they are traveling, they get excused from their classes because of the fact that right now, classes are going on and all that kind of stuff, and they're specially treated. Just essentially say, hey, they're not really students. They're just people we hired to represent the University of Missouri.
Right. And they just their grades need to be just good enough to get a diploma. Well, if that's what they want.
Not even grades. Just say, hey, they're not even students. They're just representatives of the university. We hired them. And because I don't know. I guess the thing that bothers me, not that I'm an athlete, but to the point where I see what the athletes have complained about is the universities make so much money off of college sports, and yet the students don't get a part of that. But now where the equation has been flipped back around, where the students are making a lot of money and they don't give a rip about the college anymore because of the fact that it's all about, because you see these stories all the time. If you're a sports nerd, you see these stories all the time. Some guy says he's going to so-and-so university, and then all of a sudden he says he's not going there because of the fact that the collective didn't come up with enough money. And like when you said the booster club, that's exactly what the collectives are. I've heard this guy on St. Louis radio a couple times, and every time I hear him, I think to myself, this is a scam. This is just a scam. But, what do I know? And the answer to that question is not much.
Incorrect. You know a whole lot, Brad. We're up against...
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?